Operation Clean Sweep establishes a structured approach to interior immigration enforcement through sequenced operations across the United States. It coordinates federal, state, and local resources to conduct removals in a manner that achieves broad coverage while incorporating mechanisms for documentation and deterrence. The design addresses the distribution of enforcement activities by concentrating efforts in targeted areas before advancing, thereby creating conditions for sustained action over multiple cycles. Preparation aligns with seasonal patterns in agriculture to allow time for growers and related industries to adjust labor arrangements for subsequent periods. This framework operates through geographic progression that begins in states with lower population densities and expands systematically. Initial activities focus on building operational protocols and interagency coordination in regions such as North Dakota before moving southward through adjacent states. The structure divides the country along a central line once early phases conclude, enabling parallel efforts on eastern and western sides that proceed towards southern areas. Resource surges occur in concentrated fashion within each targeted state or group of states, utilizing all applicable assets for defined periods before relocation to the next location in sequence. The objectives encompass the removal of individuals present without authorization, the generation of permanent records through biometric data collection during encounters, and the facilitation of voluntary departures through visible enforcement presence. Ancillary components include provisions for citizen reporting and participation, as well as measures to redirect housing and employment opportunities in cleared areas toward American citizens. Border-adjacent processing systems receive individuals channeled through interior movements, where expedited reviews determine outcomes including removal or continued containment in designated facilities. The overall design supports normalization of such operations as an adjustable component of routine governmental functions. The cascading geographic structure and phased execution of sweeps. The operation initiates in the central northern portion of the country with North Dakota designated as the starting state. This selection accommodates a large geographic expanse paired with a smaller population, which facilitates thorough preparation and the formation of working relationships with state and local governments prior to expansion. Subsequent movement proceeds directly southward through South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma, with measured inclusion of northern Texas segments to complete the initial central line. This ordering permits the accumulation of practical experience in settings that allow for manageable resource deployment before engagement with areas of greater scale. Following establishment of the central line, the operation divides into concurrent eastern and western tracks. Montana commences activities on the western track while Minnesota initiates the eastern track, with both lines then advancing southward through subsequent states. Larger population centers encountered in later stages benefit from the systems and efficiencies developed earlier, as local law enforcement and governmental structures integrate more readily into coordinated efforts. The division of the country supports simultaneous progress once foundational operations demonstrate effectiveness, thereby accelerating overall coverage without indefinite retention of assets in any single region. Within each state, the sweep unfolds through 4 or 5 distinct phases executed in rapid succession over a period of several days to 1 week. These phases address sequential categories of targets, commencing with prominent locations and known concentrations before progressing to business operations, residential settings, and remaining individuals. Completion of the full sequence in one state leads immediately to the commencement of activities in the next designated state, preserving schedule integrity and forward momentum. The rapid phasing ensures comprehensive attention to varied environments while avoiding prolonged occupation that could hinder advancement to subsequent areas in the national sequence. Iterative rounds, biometric tracking, and self-deportation incentives. The framework employs multiple rounds of application across the same geographic areas to achieve progressive refinement. The initial round prioritizes obvious cases of unauthorized presence and associated criminal conduct, generating baseline data and establishing operational precedents. Subsequent rounds return to previously addressed states with enhanced information systems and improved local coordination, shifting emphasis toward more complex fraudulent statuses including fabricated asylum or refugee claims and various visa violations. Citizen preparation between rounds increases the effectiveness of reporting and identification, allowing later cycles to address residual or concealed cases with greater precision. Biometric data collection occurs as a standard element during encounters and processing throughout all rounds. This process creates permanent federal records incorporating photographs, fingerprints, and additional identifiers that support future identification and enforcement actions. The establishment of such records contributes to deterrence by establishing traceability for any subsequent encounters. Individuals subject to these processes face formal documentation that remains accessible to appropriate authorities, thereby influencing decisions regarding continued presence or re-entry attempts. Self-deportation arises as a significant outcome through the combination of visible operations and record creation. Many individuals elect voluntary departure to avoid formal arrest, processing, and entry into federal databases. This dynamic reduces the volume of direct government-conducted removals while achieving the broader objective of decreased unauthorized presence. The incentive structure strengthens across iterative rounds as awareness of documentation consequences spreads and local monitoring discourages re-infiltration into cleared areas. Safe passage on interstates and management of mass movements. The framework incorporates provisions for directing movement through designated routes during periods of heightened enforcement activity. Individuals receive information that utilization of the interstate highway system provides a structured option for southward progression toward border regions or processing facilities. This channeling occurs through public communication that emphasizes the interstate routes as the permitted pathway for self-deportation or attendance at hearings. The design explicitly restricts movement to these controlled access highways and prohibits diversion onto regular highways or entry into towns and communities located off the interstate system. Law enforcement resources monitor interstate corridors to facilitate orderly flow where movement complies with designated paths while intercepting activities that constitute criminal conduct or prohibited diversions. Pre-positioning of assets along likely routes enables response to disturbances or attempts to enter restricted areas. The approach transforms potential disorganized exoduses into managed progressions that align with perimeter processing objectives. Education regarding the interstate-only pathway serves to minimize community-level disruptions while supporting the overall removal and documentation goals. Mass movements generated by enforcement activity receive anticipatory attention through resource allocation along probable corridors. Coordination among federal, state, and local entities ensures capacity to address criminal elements within such movements or to direct compliant flows toward appropriate endpoints. This management integrates with biometric systems to enable rapid identification during any encounters that occur along the routes. Planning for civil unrest, post-sweep issues, and double-back options. The framework includes explicit preparation for civil unrest and associated disturbances that may accompany large-scale operations. National Guard units and layered law enforcement resources stand prepared for deployment to maintain order and protect personnel and property during protests or riots. Planning encompasses scenarios involving both planned and spontaneous events, with mechanisms drawn from established governmental authorities for civil disturbance response. Such events create opportunities for the identification and arrest of individuals engaged in criminal conduct linked to unauthorized presence or related activities. Post-sweep monitoring addresses the possibility of individuals who remain concealed during primary operations and later re-emerge in cleared areas. Local and state law enforcement, supported by National Guard availability as required and supplemented by citizen reporting systems, handle these residual cases. Coordination ensures that re-emergence does not undermine prior removals and that hostile or disruptive elements receive prompt attention. This ongoing local capacity operates independently of the main advancing operation while remaining connected to federal resources for escalation as needed. Double-back options provide operational flexibility within the overall progression. Resources may be redirected on a targeted basis to previously swept locations experiencing specific disruptions, such as organized uprisings, without interruption of the primary sequence through remaining states. This contingency establishes a precedent for responsive adjustment while preserving the schedule-driven advancement that characterizes the national rollout. Pre-planned triggers and coordination protocols govern such reallocations to maintain coherence across the broader effort. Citizen collaboration, relocation incentives, and border infrastructure. Citizen participation forms an integral component through structured education on legal reporting mechanisms and identification of violations. Programs encourage reporting of locations, workplace practices, and post-sweep re-infiltration attempts to appropriate authorities. Whistleblower systems extend this involvement to employer, employee, and observer contexts, with reward structures tied to actionable information regarding unauthorized hiring and related violations. These channels supply intelligence that informs targeting during sweeps and subsequent rounds. Relocation measures direct attention to areas from which individuals have been removed. Government assistance supports American citizens in accessing vacated housing and employment opportunities, with particular provisions for those previously displaced from communities. This redirection of resources includes handling of properties and titles associated with prior occupants, thereby facilitating transitions that lower localized housing costs and restore demographic balance in affected regions. Incentives align with broader economic adjustments arising from reduced unauthorized labor presence. Border infrastructure receives parallel development to receive individuals channeled from interior operations. Designated camps and expedited court systems, coordinated with the Department of Justice, process arrivals through biometric confirmation and review of entry circumstances, criminal history, and other factors. Outcomes include removal in the large majority of cases involving unauthorized entry or additional violations, with non-removed individuals retained in camp facilities without authorization for interior return. The creation of records during both interior encounters and border processing establishes comprehensive traceability that reinforces long-term enforcement capacity. Conclusion. The integrated elements of Operation Clean Sweep produce a cohesive system for interior enforcement that progresses from initial concentrated actions to refined and sustained application. Geographic sequencing combined with rapid phasing enables comprehensive coverage while building operational capacity for later stages. Iterative rounds allow progressive targeting of increasingly complex cases as citizen involvement and data systems mature. Biometric documentation and structured movement pathways through interstate routes generate deterrence and facilitate orderly outcomes. Contingency provisions for unrest and post-sweep dynamics ensure resilience against disruptions, while double-back capabilities maintain responsiveness without compromising overall momentum. Citizen collaboration through reporting and whistleblower channels multiplies enforcement reach and supports community-level monitoring. Relocation incentives and border processing systems address both immediate removal objectives and longer-term stabilization of cleared areas and perimeter management. The framework normalizes systematic enforcement as an adjustable governmental function capable of scaling according to conditions. Preparation for agricultural timing, resource concentration followed by parallel expansion, and layered coordination across jurisdictions produce conditions for consistent execution. Permanent records, visible operations, and community participation together sustain pressure against unauthorized presence while directing resources towards citizen restoration and border resolution. This structure delivers the capacity for repeated application across all states with mechanisms for continuous refinement and adaptation.